In the heart of the 17th century, a continent tore itself apart. Europe, a land of rising empires and simmering faith, became a crucible of fire, steel, and blood. Cities that had stood for centuries burned to the ground. Armies, vast and unforgiving, marched across a fractured landscape, leaving behind a trail of devastation. Kingdoms teetered on the brink of collapse, their futures written in the smoke of battlefields. This was not just a war, it was the birth of a new world, forged in the crucible of chaos. It was the 30 Years' War. Our story begins in a Europe divided. The Holy Roman Empire, a patchwork of states and principalities, was a powder keg of political ambition and religious fervor. For decades, tensions between Catholics and Protestants had been escalating, a cold war of faith that threatened to erupt into open conflict. In the east, the mighty Ottoman Empire loomed, while in the west, the great powers of Spain and France vied for continental dominance. Each nation watched its rivals, waiting for the first sign of weakness, the first opportunity to strike. The spark that lit this continental fire came from a high window in Prague Castle. On May 23, 1618, a group of Protestant nobles, furious with the policies of their Catholic king, confronted his imperial representatives. The argument grew heated, and in a shocking act of defiance, the officials were thrown from the window. This event, known as the Defenestration of Prague, was more than just an assault, it was a declaration. A symbolic gesture that sent shockwaves across the continent, signaling that the time for words had passed. The flames of rebellion, once contained, now spread like wildfire, consuming the German lands and pulling all of Europe into its inferno. What began as a regional religious dispute spiraled into a continent-wide struggle for power. Alliances formed and shattered like glass. The war unfolded in brutal phases, each one drawing new players onto the bloody stage. The powerful Spanish Empire, defenders of the Catholic faith, and the Habsburg dynasty committed its legendary armies to crush the Protestant rebellion. They saw this as a chance to consolidate their power, to reassert their dominance over a restless Europe. But as they poured men and gold into the German quagmire, they found themselves facing an ever-growing coalition of enemies. France, led by the cunning Cardinal Richelieu, watched from the sidelines, waiting for the perfect moment. Though Catholic, France's greatest fear was a strong, unified Habsburg Empire on its borders. So, they secretly and later openly funded and supported the Protestant cause, turning the conflict into a proxy war for European supremacy. From the north came a new force, a military storm from Sweden, led by its brilliant and daring king, Gustavus Adolphus. His innovative tactics and disciplined armies swept through the empire, turning the tide of the war and shattering the myth of Spanish invincibility. The German states became the chessboard upon which these great powers played their deadly game. Their lands ravaged, their people caught in the crossfire. The war became a relentless meat grinder. Decisive battles like Breitenfeld and Lutzen saw legendary commanders rise and fall. The battlefield was a terrifying spectacle of pike formations, musket fire, and cavalry charges. But the war's true horror was felt far from the front lines. Armies lived off the land, stripping it bare like locusts. Famine became a constant companion. Disease, carried by soldiers and refugees, swept through cities and villages, claiming more lives than the sword. Entire regions were depopulated, their fields scorched, their communities erased from the map. The human cost was staggering, a generation lost to a conflict that seemed to have no end. The initial ideals of faith and justice were drowned in a sea of suffering, replaced by the simple, desperate struggle for survival. After 30 years of ceaseless conflict, the combatants were exhausted. Treasuries were empty, armies were depleted, and the will to fight had been bled dry. The once mighty Spanish Empire, fighting on multiple fronts and facing internal rebellions, was stretched to its breaking point. The German lands were a wasteland. Even the victors found their triumphs hollow, their gains overshadowed by the immense cost. Desperation paved the road to peace. In the Westphalian towns of Munster and Osnabrück, diplomats gathered for one of the most complex negotiations in history. For years, they argued, postured, and compromised, hammering out a new order for Europe while the fighting still sputtered on. It was a monumental effort, a testament to the collective yearning for an end to the carnage. The Peace of Westphalia in 1648 did not simply end the war. It redrew the map of Europe and redefined the nature of power itself. The dream of a unified Catholic empire was shattered forever. Instead, a new concept emerged: the sovereignty of states. Rulers would have the right to determine their own state's religion, free from external interference. This laid the foundation for the modern international system we know today. For Spain, the outcome was a painful reckoning. They had lost territory and their military prestige had been tarnished. The era of their unquestioned dominance was over. Yet, to declare Spain defeated would be a mistake. Stripped of its imperial overcommitments, Spain was forced to adapt. It began a period of internal restructuring, focusing its resources and reinforcing its core territories and colonial empire. It learned to play the game of diplomacy with a new shrewdness, forging strategic alliances to counterbalance the rising power of France. While no longer the singular superpower, Spain skillfully navigated the new European landscape, preserving its great power status and regaining significant influence through calculated political and economic maneuvering. It was a remarkable comeback, a story of resilience born from the ashes of defeat. The 30 Years' War was a scar on the face of Europe, but also a catalyst for profound change. It transformed politics, religion, and the very art of warfare. It gave birth to the modern state system and set the stage for the next centuries of European history. Out of the burning cities and blood-soaked fields, a new Europe was born, a continent of competing nations, balanced power, and enduring rivalries. The echoes of this cataclysmic conflict resonate to this day, a powerful reminder of how destruction can pave the way for rebirth, and how even in the darkest of times, the struggle for power never truly ends. Thank you for joining us on this journey through one of history's most defining conflicts. If you found this story compelling, please like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the events that shaped our world. See you next time.